Welcome to PodWavePulse, where we bring new, insightful topics for you. Today, we're going to be looking at something I think you'll find really fascinating. It's the idea that science fiction, those incredible stories we all love, has this weird tendency to, predict the future. It's not just random guesses either. We're talking about specific technologies and even shifts in society that have actually happened. Do these writers have a secret crystal ball or something?
Right.
It really makes you think. So we've gathered a bunch of articles and research that dives deep into this connection between science fiction and reality, and we're going to break down some of the most mind-blowing examples.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too. It really is remarkable how often science fiction has gotten things right. And it's not just about predicting specific inventions, it's about how these stories can shape our thinking about what's possible, Sometimes it feels like the imagination comes first, and then the innovation follows.
Totally. So let's rewind the clock a bit. Science fiction really started gaining steam in the 1800s, right around the same time as all these crazy scientific discoveries were happening.
Exactly. Think about the 19th century, all those groundbreaking advancements in science and technology. Science fiction kind of provided this space, this outlet to explore what all these changes could mean for humanity.
Right.
And a lot of these early authors, they weren't just pulling ideas out of thin air. They were taking trends they saw in society and extrapolating them, pushing them to their limits, sometimes even to extremes. It was almost as if they were asking, if this keeps going, what's next?
And some of those what's next predictions turned out to be eerily accurate. Think about H.G. Wells. He envisioned tanks in warfare way before they were actually used, and even those automatic doors we see everywhere now. It's kind of wild.
It really is. Wells had this incredible ability to grasp these emerging technologies and understand, where they could lead. He wasn't just making things up. He grounded his fiction in the scientific knowledge of his time and then let his imagination run wild. And then you have his 1914 novel, The World Set Free. In it, he describes something very much like an atomic bomb and the devastating consequences of its use.
Wow.
When you consider what actually happened later, the Manhattan Project and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's chilling how much Wells's fictional vision aligned with reality.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about the technology itself, but the implications, too. And speaking of predictions, we can't forget Jules Verne.
Right.
He wasn't just writing thrilling adventures. He had this uncanny ability to get the technical details right, sometimes decades before they existed. I was reading about his book, Paris in the 20th Century, and how it predicted things like cars, high-speed trains, and even the internet.
It's almost like he had a time machine, right? Verne was meticulous in his research. He would dive deep into the science of his day, which gave his writing this incredible realism, even though he was describing things that seemed impossible at the time. But it's important to remember, not everyone sees science fiction as purely about predicting the future. Samuel R. Delany, for example, had a different take.
Right, Delany. He argued that science fiction was more about distorting the present than predicting the future. Can you unpack that a bit? What did he mean?
So Delany and other literary critics, they argue that science fiction often uses these futuristic settings as a way to comment on the present, to hold up a mirror to society. By creating these twisted versions of reality, authors can highlight the social, political, or cultural issues of their time in a really impactful way. It's not always about this is what will happen, but more like this is what we should be thinking about right now.
That's a really insightful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to some specific areas where science fiction has been remarkably good at foreshadowing the future. Space exploration is an obvious one. I mean, who hasn't dreamt of space travel after reading a good sci-fi book or watching a movie?
For sure. And it goes beyond just the dreaming, too. When you see those grand visions of space stations in science fiction, like Space Station V from 2001, A Space Odyssey, it captured this idea of humanity having a permanent presence in space. And look at us now. We have the International Space Station. Sure, it's primarily focused on scientific research, but that core concept, a habitable outpost orbiting Earth, promoting international collaboration, that's straight out of science fiction.
Absolutely. It's amazing how closely those fictional depictions mirrored what actually came to be. And with projects like the Deep Space Gateway, which is intended to orbit the moon, it feels like we're just taking those early sci-fi visions and running with them.
We are. It's incredible, isn't it? It really makes you wonder if those stories didn't, on some level, inspire the very ambitions that led to these real-world projects.
It's like the dream came before the blueprint. Okay, let's talk about technological innovations. Jules Verne's name pops up again here, especially when we think about the Apollo 11 moon landing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, while Verne's depiction of space travel was definitely more fantasy than science back in his day, it captured the public imagination. And in a way, it planted the seed of possibility and made people think, hey, maybe one day we could actually go to the moon. And then fast forward to Star Trek. That little communicator they used to talk to each other across planets.
Iconic.
It's so iconic, right? It's basically a flip phone, decades before flip phones were even a thing. You have to wonder if the engineers who designed those phones were, like, subconsciously influenced by Star Trek.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's like seeing something in a story and then thinking, wait, we could build that. Okay, what about the ways humans interact with technology? Science fiction has also explored that aspect in some really thought-provoking ways.
For sure. Like, remember H.G. Wells again? In his 1923 book, Men Like Gods, he actually describes something very similar to voicemail. Imagine how wild that idea must have seemed back then, leaving a message for someone who's not physically there.
Yeah, it's easy to take that for granted now.
Right. And then there's Jules Verne again with the year 2889, where he imagines something like video calling. It took a while, but fast forward to 1964, and AT&T actually demonstrated a working picture phone.
Wow.
It's crazy to think about how science fiction can anticipate not just the gadgets themselves, but also how they might change the way we communicate and interact with each other.
Right. And sometimes those changes aren't portrayed as purely positive. 1984, George Orwell's classic dystopian novel, is a prime example of how science fiction can explore the potential downsides of technology, especially when it comes to surveillance and the erosion of privacy. It's pretty unsettling how relevant that book still feels today.
Absolutely. It's almost like a cautionary tale that keeps echoing through time. Orwell's vision of constant surveillance, thought control, it's become this essential reference point in discussions about the balance between security and individual freedoms in our increasingly tech-driven world. It serves as a stark reminder that technological progress isn't always a straight line to utopia. We need to be mindful of the potential consequences.
I agree. Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about transportation. I found it really interesting that NASA is using technology similar to driverless cars for the robotic vehicles they're sending to explore other planets.
Yeah, that's a cool example of how innovation in one area can spill over into another, sometimes in unexpected ways. Think about it.
Yeah.
Driving a rover on Mars, with all the delays in communication and the unpredictable terrain, it presents some of the same challenges as developing self-driving cars here on Earth. So it makes sense that they'd borrow ideas from each other.
That's fascinating. All right, let's get into some more specific case studies. Autonomous vehicles are a big one, and Isaac Asimov was way ahead of the curve on this. Back in 1964, he predicted robot brain cars at future World's Fairs, even specifically mentioning the 2014 World's Fair. How crazy is that?
Talk about calling it. Asimov really had a knack for understanding the trajectory of technology. And look at where we are now. AI and self-driving cars are basically synonymous. Companies like Waymo, Ford, GM, they're all pouring tons of resources into developing this technology. It's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of when. And it makes you wonder, did Asimov's stories play a role in planting that seed in making this seem like an achievable goal?
It's a good question. Okay, who can forget that iconic scene in Star Wars where Princess Leia's holographic message appears? That really solidified the idea of holographic technology in our collective imagination. Have we made any progress towards that becoming a reality?
Well, we're not quite at the level of projecting life-size interactive holograms in our living rooms yet, but there have been some pretty impressive advancements. For instance, an Australian company developed these 3D hologram tables back in 2017. They're not quite Princess Leia, but it shows that we're moving in that direction.
That's still super cool. Okay, another Star Trek classic, the Universal Translator. Imagine being able to understand any language instantly. Have we gotten any closer to that kind of seamless translation?
I mean, we're not quite there yet, but we've made huge strides. Devices like the Pocket Talk can translate languages in real time, and services like Skype have built-in voice translation features. They're not perfect, but they're getting better all the time. Who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to have those Star Trek-style conversations where everyone understands each other perfectly. Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would change everything. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about artificial intelligence. 2001, A Space Odyssey, and HAL 9000. That was both fascinating and a little terrifying. It really got people thinking about the potential and the dangers of AI.
Definitely. HAL is like the ultimate example of AI gone wrong. But, science fiction often grapples with these two sides of AI. On the one hand, it has the potential to do incredible things. Like right now, AI is being used in astronomy to analyze data and discover new planets. But on the other hand, we have to think about the ethical implications. What happens when machines become super intelligent? Do they pose a threat? These are questions we need to keep asking as AI continues to evolve.
Right. So given all these examples, what kind of impact has science fiction had on society in general? Do you think those fictional visions have actually influenced how we think about technology?
I think they've had a huge impact in several ways. First, as we've been talking about, science fiction gets people thinking about the implications of technology. It sparks conversations, debates, and even anxieties about what the future might hold. This is especially important when it comes to issues like privacy, surveillance, and the ethical use of AI. It's almost like a mental preparation for the future, helping us grapple with these complex issues before they become reality.
That's a really good point. It's like a collective rehearsal for what might be coming.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual thoughts and anxieties. Science fiction can actually influence public opinion about specific technologies and even government policies. When you see certain ideas repeated in popular culture, it shapes how people view those ideas in the real world. And then there's the impact on actual inventors and engineers. There are countless scientists and engineers who were inspired by science fiction. It sparked their curiosity, their imagination, their desire to create. It's almost like science fiction gave them a roadmap, a vision of what might be possible.
And in this age of rapid technological advancement, with things like quantum computing and smart cities on the horizon, science fiction can help us navigate these uncharted waters. It's a way to explore different possibilities, both good and bad, and to prepare for the challenge ahead.
Totally. It's like a creative space where we can test out different futures. Okay, so let's look ahead. What are some of the most plausible predictions for the future based on what we're seeing now and, maybe even some inspiration from science fiction?
Let's do it.
All right, so first up, AI in healthcare. This seems like an absolute certainty. We're already seeing AI algorithms being used for diagnosis, personalized treatment plans, even streamlining healthcare systems. And this is just the beginning. Imagine a future where healthcare is truly personalized, proactive, and maybe even more effective than it is today.
That would be incredible. What else?
Quantum computing. This is another one with huge potential. As quantum computers become more powerful and more stable, they could revolutionize everything from drug discovery to material science to cryptography. Whoever masters this technology first could have a huge advantage. And then, of course, there are the self-driving cars. We've talked about them already, but they're going to become even more sophisticated and more common in the coming years. This could completely transform transportation, making it safer, more efficient, and less stressful.
I'm all for less stressful commutes.
Right. And then there's the rise of smart cities. Imagine cities that use the Internet of Things to optimize everything, from traffic flow to energy consumption to waste management. That's the vision of smart cities. More efficient, more sustainable, and hopefully better places to live.
Sounds promising.
But of course, with all this interconnectedness comes the need for seriously strong cybersecurity. The more we rely on technology, the more vulnerable we become to cyber attacks. So we're going to see even more development in AI-powered cybersecurity to protect our data, our infrastructure, and our privacy. And then there are the more futuristic possibilities, like human-machine integration. We're already seeing advancements in prosthetics and brain-computer interfaces. What happens when those technologies become even more advanced? Could we merge our minds with machines? It's both exciting and a little scary to think about. And finally, there's personalized medicine. This is where your treatment is tailored to your individual genetic makeup. With advancements in genomics and AI, this is becoming more and more realistic. Imagine a world where medicine is truly personalized and incredibly effective.
Okay, so basically, the future is going to be wild, like something straight out of a science fiction novel.
Pretty much. And who knows what other mind-blowing advancements are just around the corner. That's what's so exciting about this. The interplay between imagination and innovation, it never stops.
Well, this has been an amazing journey exploring the connection between science fiction and the real world. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What seemingly impossible ideas are being dreamed up right now that might become the everyday realities of tomorrow. It's something to ponder for sure.
It is.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Please subscribe to our channel.